Welcome back to another Conscious Energy Officer Show. I'm your host, Graham Parr, with my co-hosts, Graham Betchart and John Costanzo. What's going on, fellas?
Grant, John, what's going on, everybody? Welcome. And welcome all you officers out there. We built this show for you. We built this to teach mental training, to give you core foundational mental training skills to help you in service with what you do every day. And real quick, we have 4 foundational skills that we reference all the time. We teach 16 in our course that we want to take you through, but there's 4 you'll always hear us reference. And real quick, I'll go through them. The first one is what's important now. And that literally means focus on what's in your control and let go of what's out of your control. So we're going to be building that list throughout this whole course, throughout all the work we do. But we start with what's important now, right? What's in your control. And you start there as an officer. The second skill is play present or police present. And that means you got to be where your feet are. You got to be in this moment right now. So often under pressure, right? You can probably relate to this. We're trying to anticipate results. We're trying to wonder what's going to happen, or we're reliving some shit that happened in the past. We have to learn to be present as officers, and we have to own that being in the moment. And that's a skill. That's a practice. But that leads us to our third skill, which is called next play speed. And next play speed means this: when you lose your focus, which happens, can you come back with it? Can you bounce back to the next play, the next moment, and come back to the present? It's a super important skill. This is resiliency. This is grittiness, because I've been doing this mental performance coaching for 20 years. Fuck, we lose our focus all the time. So next play speed is where it's at. It's about coming back. And now our fourth skill is what we call palms down. Palms down is the opposite of this energy. Fuck, I'm reacting. Some shit's happening. The emotions are too much. Palms down is I'm going to choose my response. Palms down policing is super powerful. That means you're emotionally intelligent. You're able to feel feelings, but choose your response to those feelings and then harmonize in the present moment. And then now we're really learning to be an alpha. And an alpha is not the biggest man who lifts the most weights. The alpha is who can harmonize the energy on scene. So those 4 skills we reference all the time. And then John usually takes us through a story or some scenarios, and we get to kind of work through some shit and practice that. So John, welcome. So grateful you're here, man, and grateful to do another show. And I think you have a topic for us today that we're going to get off with.
Yeah, that was a great introduction as always. Today's topic, we're gonna bring it back to the beginning, and it starts with focus. All right. So I think it was our 3rd episode, feelings. I believe I brought up like our community connection, and we talked about Calvin and Drew. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if I introduced Drew yet at that point, but Calvin, he was aggressively panhandling at a station. I, connected with him, and he got in his feelings, and he just projected a lot of energy towards me, and it was nasty. And so I just worked on my inner control, and he ended up leaving, and I ended up coming back the next day, checking on him, and he, it was different. Like he was in fear at first, and then I disarmed his fear by just saying, like, no, I'm here to check on you. Like, are you okay? Right. So I connected with Calvin, and that the reason I share that and bring that back up is because when we talk about focus, we focus and we control what we can control, the first skill, not what we can't control. And what we can't control is the way somebody responds to something. And as an officer, we don't know what interaction they may have experienced, before we arrived, with an officer. And it might have been a terrible experience. It might have been terrifying. So like we talked about before, they might be in fear. And so what we need to focus on is our energy, what we bring to the table. Are we calm and cool? Are we under control? Right. And so in that story, connecting with Calvin, that's how it happened. I felt the feeling of his rejection, and I came back, and I kept showing up. And because that's something I can control, right? Keep showing up, keep checking on Calvin, because he's a homeless man. He sleeps on the street. It's rough, right? So I ask him simple questions like, how did you sleep last night? And I really just connect with his life and his story. And so he shares, and it's great. So from there is where I met Drew. And now Drew is another homeless man that came around a little bit later. And then I started connecting with him. And, at the same time, I just focus on what I can control. And little by little, we call, walk to win. I started hearing their story. And every day I would pop in and check on them. I'd bring them clothes. Like I would do what I can to connect with these guys and really just impact their life in a way that maybe an officer hasn't yet, or somebody hasn't yet. And do it by showing that I care, And so now our relationship has grown, exponentially. But by doing that and showing up every day, focusing on what I can control and not focusing on the results, not focusing on the outcomes, not focusing on what they're giving back at me. Because some days they just weren't in it, like I could tell they were checked out. It's very easy to do, in this life, right? So I just stayed present. I focused on my interaction with them. And now it's a great relationship. They look forward to when I come around. I come around, and one day Calvin wasn't there, and I walked around, and all of a sudden he comes running across the street, and he's like, "Oh, Mr. John," and it's like, wow, it's so cool. It's so cool to have that like friendship, that connection. But it all started with me just showing up and focusing on what I can control. Right.
Man, John, that's so massive. And I think a really big thing to think about is, because we always say this, right? Don't focus on results and outcomes. And at the same time, in police work, fucking results and outcomes count, right? So we have to acknowledge, like, it's not that we're saying we don't want to get great results and outcomes. We're just saying this anxious focus on results and outcomes doesn't end up helping you very much.
Yep.
So, but we're trying to win. And what I see you doing here with Calvin is you're getting little wins every day. And these little wins are important to track inside of yourself, because usually we're just tracking this one big result, this one big thing. Yet when we're doing mental training, we have to bring it back to, okay, our first skill is what's important now, what's in your control. Every time you focus on what's in your control, every time you do that, that's a win. And it's not going to come from the outside. The person who's in charge, your sergeant, whoever's in, is not going to say, "Hey, great job." You're going to know internally you just did something great. And so you have to, as an officer, have these little metrics where you're giving yourself little rewards throughout the day, and you're racking up wins. Like, these are real fucking wins. Like, these are the real wins, right? You go through your day, you're like, okay, what's important now? Fuck, did that 12 times today. Amazing. You may not have gotten any result. No one knows anything that you've done, but inside you're like, I had 12 great mental training moments where I focused on what I could control. And so you stack those inside of yourself, and internally you're like, I'm winning. And that's how you build with the mental stuff. Because a lot of times people go, well, Graham, how do I know if I'm winning? If we're not fucking focused on results and outcomes, how the hell do I track progress? And the progress is, are you doing these little things? And you get a little internal reward, right? The reward is a little internal, like, yeah, just did it. And you should start to feel a little ping inside of you, a little ping, a little like reward system that goes, you just did it. And so you're going through your day and you're building momentum with these little wins just by focusing on what you can't control. So you say something to Calvin, you're focused on what you can't control. And he's like, fuck you, John, you're a shitty cop. And inside you're like, wow, that really hurts. But like, I'm just going to take a breath right now and choose my response. I'm fucking winning. I'm winning right now. You're like, yeah, but technically I'm hurting and he just rejected me. But because you framed it with what's important now, you're getting a win. Like, you're getting a win out of that. You're like, no, I got to win. And then, 4 days later, Calvin's like, hey, John, how are you, man? You're like, yeah, here's the win playing out. Look at this win playing out. Look at this.
Yeah.
So you have to reward yourself. It's super important when you do this. When I say it took me 12 years to be an overnight success, right? Like 12 years later, you Google my name. You're like, oh, fuck, look at Graham. He's this thing. I didn't feel like a winner that day 12 years. I was a winner every single day, because I would go through the day and say, what's important now? And I'd be giving this mental training to people. Even if 9 out of 10 were like, you're full of shit, you're crazy, I'd be like, but I still did it. I still showed up. I'm still present. I was choosing my response. I'm a winner. And someone from the outside might say, you're a loser. You just got rejected 9 straight times. But internally, because I'm doing mental training, I'm like, no, what's important now? I nailed that shit. And then I have real confidence. And now the outside world's not breaking me down. It's not whooping my ass, right? Because I'm building myself up from within. Yep. And I'm building within. And you want to think about this, like think of a Coke can. We may have used this analogy, right? A Coke can that's empty. If I flick it just like this with my finger, that fucker buckles. Shit will just buckle right in half, right? And that's like someone who's not getting internal wins, who's not doing these internal little wins all throughout the day. Then this outside thing happens to them. Oh, they fucking buckle. Like just like buckled. But if we're going through getting these little wins, officers, this is for you. And you're focusing on what you can control, telling yourself, I'm doing a great job. Now you're a Coke can full of Coke. And you flick that shit's not buckling. That shit's durable because you're filled with real shit. So someone says, fuck you, cop, which I know you go through. I know you go through that. Come on, let's keep it real. Let's go to the real shit.
Yeah.
You pig, you ain't shit. And you're like, cool. I'm so filled from inside. I know what's important now. Let me choose my response. Within 2 minutes, that same person's like, you're not a pig. Why the fuck am I acting like this? And you see what I mean? Like, but you.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you said that because I had that recently, and then
of course.
we'll go for it because it's real, right? I had that happen. I was explaining to a guy the law, right? We were in DC, and he broke the law. Let's just put it that way. I won't get into the details of that, but I was explaining it to him, and I'm like, listen, I've been doing this for 14 years. I just want you to understand where we're at with all this. I want to inform you, right? Because we talked about this before. Inform people, right? Don't let them sit in this fear. Break down their fear. How do we do that? We connect with them. So we do that by, let's be real. Let's just share what is going on right now, right? Calm and cool. And right after that, he's like, you look like a 14-year-old. And I'm like,
sorry.
I'm like, what? And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I took a breath, right? And then I go, cool, tell me more. It blew his mind. He was like, what the fuck? He's like, what just happened? He's like, tell me more. He's like, yeah, tell me more. I'm a 14-year-old. I mean, I look young, right? This is a compliment. Like, where are we going with this? And then so he was confused. And then I said, listen, I'm just trying to talk to you man to man. This is real talk, right? Like, I'm trying to just be honest with you and tell you what's going on. And I'm like, so he's like, well, I'm a man. I was like, are you? I was like, okay, well, let's talk man to man. I was like, what are we doing here? I'm like, you're defensive. And he's like, no, I'm not. And then I'm like, well, what's this? And he goes, and he puts his hands down by his side. I was like, there you go. You're loosening up. I like it. I was like, all right, let's have a real talk now. And then so afterwards, he went from telling me that I looked like a 14-year-old to totally disengaging his fear. And then he's like, look, he's like, these other officers, they're like droids. And they were just officers, right? They were just people, right? But that's what he referred to them as. And then he's like, you're like Jesus, like. He's like, we're connecting on this level that I haven't connected with somebody. And I just kind of chuckled. And I said, no, I know what you're saying. I was like, I appreciate that, but I'm not Jesus. And then so the rest of the interaction just went so smooth. And it was like the coolest thing, right?
Awesome. That's so
because
cool.
I chose my response and I was like, cool, tell me more. Because you know why? I was that Coke can that was full. I had that inner confidence, you know?
With you, and you're just like, hey, how you doing, man?
Yeah.
I was like, flick again. They're like, flick again.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't want to flick you anymore. That, like, John, that's as high level as it gets, you know? And
it's cool.
You didn't, so cool. What's important now? Don't take it personal. Choose your response, you know, have compassion for this person.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're reacting, whatever they see when they see like a cop, and they're going to see it through me. So whatever their experience is before, they're going to bring that to the table. They're going to try to insult me. And you do look good, man. You're a good looking guy and you do look young. So that's a compliment. That's the biggest insult to a 14-year-old. But like, way to go, right? He's trying to poke you a little bit. And instead of reacting like, I'm not a fucking 14-year-old, I'm a 14-year vet, right? You do that, you lost the whole situation.
Yeah.
Your response. And, you know, when you say, tell me more, there is no counter to that.
No.
And when you first get into that spin cycle of love with you and you bring them into that spin cycle, they're gone. Like they're like, they're literally washed around in a place they've never experienced. And you're like, be kind in that space because they've never experienced that level of competitive compassion where you have so much compassion in that moment, you just disable all of their shit.
Yeah.
At the end, right? There's love, his hands are down and you bring it down. So like that's, if you want to like disarm a situation or control the scene, John, you did it.
Yeah.
Like that's total control of a situation. In fact, that's probably so high level. You're like, you got him to like, you told him to do more. You're like, yeah, because that means I'm so filled inside that there's a safe space for him to project his shit. That's his shit. Him thinking the 14-year-old, that's his shit, man. That's his. I feel for him.
Totally.
Yeah. And the key is to truly be genuine. Don't be a dick.
No,
be sarcastic, like, tell me more. Like, no, that's not gonna work. That'll never work. They'll see right through it. And they know now that you're offended just by your energy that you're giving back. Like it has to be true, genuine energy. Like it's got to be, because they'll see right through that shit. Like you have to be like,
that's big.
Okay, tell me more. Like just
that's the work, man. That's that's it, bro.
It's a lethal blow. It is, because he was stunned. Like he was like, it was the knockout punch. He was just sitting there like, and then I had him. That was it. It totally just opened him right up, and everything changed. Everything changed.
If you're squared up, and then all of a sudden, if you're boxing, you're fucking like this, and like, where'd it go? Wham! And the shit is like you hit them with so much light. They've never taken that hit before. And then all humans deep down, whether this is, I know some shit that's so crazy, but I'm going to share this to everyone. All humans want to connect deep down, whether they say it or not. I've studied with the highest level interrogators at the highest level of the military and shit. And they told me shit that after they're like, we probably shouldn't have told you that shit. And I was like, you did. And now I know. And I'm aware of that. And essentially all it is this, is all people want love and want to be connected with. And so you're sitting in a room, whether you're interrogating a potential terrorist or some fucking killer, you don't fucking get mad at them or any of that shit. You build a connection because deep down, everyone wants to connect. And once you know that, you just stay in that space and open that space up. Now, if you're in danger, John, it's a whole different situation, right?
Absolutely.
In these, you've assessed, I'm not in physical danger right here. So I'm going to use all these skills to help soften this whole scene. If you were in physical danger, you'd have to do something, right? We're talking about techniques. They're like someone's rushing you with a knife. You're not going to say, hey, like rush me again with the knife. Like, no, bro, you're going to fucking disarm that shit, right? And like do what you do. We're talking about verbal. We're talking about energy. What's the name of this podcast? Conscious Energy Officer, right? We're talking about being aware of what your energy does and how it can totally de-escalate a whole scene. But you said a big word. It has to be genuine. If for this much you're not genuine, none of this shit works. I mean, if they sense 1.0001, you're kind of fucking with them. You're trash, and this is going on. Like it has to be so real. Your compassion for them, your love for them. That's the only thing that'll stop it. That softens them up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's so true, and it's so vital. That's why sometimes taking a breath, pausing. You saw I did that. I paused. I'm like I exhaled. He felt that. Like he knew I was like, okay, you're pushing buttons. I know what you're doing. I'm like, not today. Not today. Awesome. And I was like, I paused, I took a breath, and I was like, cool, tell me more.
Oof.
He was stunned. And that was it. He's like, I'm a man. And I'm like, oh, well, this looks like you're defensive. No, I'm not. And I'm like, there you go. And then I loosened him up, and that was it. After that, it was easy. It was so easy. And then the officers, there was a lot of officers around at that point. Like, they're like, I'm like, you guys are good. We're good here. Like, I already knew I connected with him. I had his attention. We were cool. I had some backup, but I didn't need all those officers. So what I did was, it's like, hey, it's like, you guys are good. We'll handle it. No big deal. They're like, you sure? And I was like, yeah, no problem. Because I already knew I disarmed his fear. We were in control. I was conducting the energy, right? And it was like everything else after that, the guy was cool. It's like, hey, I need your information. Yeah, no problem. Here you go. Just like that, right?
This is real energy work right here. So I think with this story and where this show went to today, everyone listening to this, that's the power of energy work. Like that's the power of being a conscious energy officer is when you operate from an energetic standpoint, you literally shift the other person's energy around you. And again, remember when we started, we were like, that's what an alpha is. An alpha is someone who can shift energy. So if everyone's scared and panicked, an alpha knows how to calm that whole shit and bring it to a different level, right? If someone's got a defensive posture because a cop walks up and they're feeling defensive, an alpha doesn't heighten the defensiveness, an alpha softens that. And John, you did it with genuine compassion. How fucking insane is it that in the moment of truth, in the biggest shit, we're talking genuine compassion is what is the ticket to this whole fucking thing. And it's the same thing I'm telling pro athletes when they're, they go, these refs are fucking me. And I'm like, the refs are not fucking you. But when you think like that, you have trouble. But as soon as they start to have compassion for the ref and literally just for one moment say, man, they got the hardest fucking job in the world, that nobody likes these people ever. Like nobody likes these people. Maybe more so than cops. Like referees they might not be disliked more than police officers right now. Like there's never been a time where people are like, man, referees are all right in my world. Like never has that been a case. You know what I mean? So what we learn to do with refs is have total compassion with them. And it's amazing. If you look at John, like everyone you're interacting with, like they're kind of like a referee and you go, well, let me see if I can have compassion for this person. It's amazing what happens in those situations. It's amazing when you genuinely say to a ref, hey, that's okay, man. Don't worry about missing that call. I'm good. It's amazing what happens when you as opposed to, yeah, way to miss that call, you fuck. Like as opposed to some sarcastic shit. Then the ref is like, fuck you. That's a T. Boom, you're out. You know, so the energy work at the highest level of competition, the highest level I've worked with in the Navy, the highest level of police officer work, bro, this is it. John, that's phenomenal, man. To be genuine when you feel kind of poked a little bit, that's tough because how easy it is just to react just for a second. Like, hey, fuck you, just for a second, right? You just want to do it one time, just real quick, just get it out of your system. This asshole's not listening. And then you've lost the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing talking to the ref. I just said fuck you to the ref one time. Well, guess what? You're out. That's it. That's all it takes.
Yeah.
Like,
we talked about that before. You know, your emotional response triggers within seconds. Your logic takes a minute. All your thoughts go through your emotions to get to the logic, right? So that's why I took a breath. I was like, ooh, that's a feeling. Feelings aren't facts. Let me pause. Let me breathe. Let me get back in my inner control. Let me not just react mindlessly, right? Let's be here. Am I a 14-year-old? No, I'm not a 14-year-old. It's like, am I like we say, you ask yourself, am I in fear? I feel the feeling of fear, but am I actually in danger physically? No, I am not. So I'm okay. So palms down, choose your response, right? You do that and you're like, oh, cool. I'm in control, you know? And then it's like it's so easy to respond and just say, cool, tell me more. Because you realize I am not a 14-year-old, right? I'm not, right? I am trying to come from compassion. He's rejecting it. Cool, no problem. Tell me more. Like it gets him every time. It's lethal. It's so lethal. And I've seen it. It's crazy how your energy can dictate and compose everything after that.
100%. 100%.
I'm not saying you're Jesus, but apparently that's what that dude was doing, is he walked around with energy. So when people, when they feel that presence, they're just catching a trace of what's possible for us as humans, that we can do this energy work. And then after that, John, you don't have to go fill out some use of fucking force paperwork after. You don't have to try to go, oh shit, what did I just do? What, like after you're like smooth as fuck, right? The recovery is probably smooth after, probably sleep good after. You might even have like a warm feeling in your heart after. You might even be like, yeah, that's high level police work.
I think it's you brought it up earlier, fulfillment. That's my reward, right? And I think that's one of the greatest human experiences is fulfillment. And that's where I get my like, ooh, that felt good. That's where I fill my Coke can, is when I am able to experience fulfillment and know that like, yes, I helped this individual today. Like, you know, I was able to connect with this individual today. This is another win. And it just piles up. And then you end up getting this supreme confidence and people feel it. It's energy, but it's this confidence that you can't fake it. They feel it. And people will tell me like, you're so confident. And I was like, yeah, that's what it is. That fulfillment and those wins that you keep stacking up. You're the full Coke can. Be the full Coke can.
Big time. And you know what's funny is, you know, obviously the the theme of our show today is focus. And just listening to both of you, I heard it a lot. Focus on breath, focus on what you can't control. So I heard it a lot, actually. So when you think about the essence of performance, any performance, doesn't matter what you're performing, the core of it is focus. And Graham, we were talking with Graham earlier about everybody's focused, but we focus on the right things. Exactly. So that's the thing, is like focusing your breath, because there's a lot of these things that are going to get us back in the present moment. There's a lot of things going to activate our confidence, but we have to focus on it for us to get into it. So just hearing the language, both of you just listening, like how important it is to focus. Well, it's very important. It's the essence of our performance.
Yep. And that's going to, piggyback off what we'll talk about next time, surrender, right? Oof. So when you're focused on something you can't control, you got to surrender that feeling and thought. And then we'll get into that next time.
Yeah, man. Well, this is incredible. This is like a powerful show. I mean, we could essentially talk about this same story every time and just keep delving into it. But in the moment, everyone out there, officers listening, as a conscious energy officer, just practicing leading with your energy, practicing some of these skills. And let's keep it real, John, you've been practicing these for quite some time. So that's the good news is, right? None of this is luck, right? This isn't like some luck. This is like, hey, once you're aware and you start practicing this shit and you're putting in week after week, month after month, year after year, right? And then you're like, okay, I've really got this skill set. This shit fucking works. But remember, it's about progress over perfection. John just shared a super high level story. That's high level work under pressure. To be able to say, tell me more. When I coach people, that's the highest fucking level you go at, is you welcome in whatever looks like your adversary and you hold that space. So to just know that exists, I'm really happy everyone knows that exists. And practice in little places. Practice with your family. Practice in other areas, right? Practice this kind of all over the place. There's all these little places to kind of practice these skills. It doesn't have to be like in your big moment as an officer in this big call, right? Start practicing this stuff a little bit every day in all the situations you're in.
A great way to practice it with your kids. If you have kids, practice it with your kids. It's a very great place to practice it.
If you say, tell me more to your kids, they might just fucking tell you more.
They might just tell you more.
So it'll be real practice.
Oh, shit.
All right, everyone. Listen, great show, great week. John and Grant, great job. Everyone tuning in, we're so grateful you're here, all the conscious energy officers out there. Our goal is to train every officer in the United States and then create an incredible community and help peace officers do an amazing job doing you guys' job and have a skill set that you can use every day, a pathway that's out there to create those community connections out there. So we're grateful you're here. I'm grateful to do this work. Grateful for you, John. Grateful for you, Grant. And grateful for this Conscious Energy Officer show. So till next week, huh?
Sounds
Have
good.
a great day.
Stay present.